Tonight's talk is entitled Harvest and Intention. And in this month of September, we have the equinox, that moment of equal time between night and day, crisp days and even crisper nights. Last couple of nights have been a little chilly. And the rainbow, did anybody see the rainbow tonight? Yeah, beautiful out there. And there's a certain sense of beginnings, I think, in September for those of us who went through school or had children who went through school. September is a month of beginnings. And it's also a month of endings because the gardening season is coming to a close and harvesting is happening. So a 7-word poem referencing harvest time. Old pear tree, starlings announce harvest time. Old pear tree, starlings announce harvest time. And harvest meaning to reap or yield, return, consequences, fruitage, ingathering, all implying a time to pause and reflect on what has been, and for some to notice what to plan for next year, including maybe an intention around planning for what's next. For the past probably 35 years, our family has made an annual trek down to the beaches of the Outer Banks in North Carolina. And for a number of years when we would go there, we stayed in Duck. And some of you are nodding. I see a few heads nodding, Outer Banks. And I would always take my bicycle and go biking. And in those days, it was an opportunity to have a little bit of quiet, alone time away from the wonderful, wonderful family that I'm part of. And I'd bike down into the village of Duck, and you may or may not be familiar with this building, but behind the Duck Methodist Church, there is a small, round chapel. Very tiny, with just a few benches in it and an organ. It's a circular structure, totally encased in glass windows. And it sits right out on the edge of the Currituck Sound in the marshy grasslands, a little bit of solid land off to one side where there are pine trees. And I like to bike down there, and you actually have to bike over the boardwalk to get out to the entrance to this building, and leave the bike outside and hop off and go inside and crank open some windows so the sea breezes could blow through. And I was captivated by a stained glass window, only one in this structure, that contained an inscription, and this is what it said. I expect to pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness I can show to any fellow being, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. And I looked that up online this week to see, because I couldn't remember who wrote it. And it's attributed to at least 24 different people. So you just take your choice. You could. One reference said it was Stephen Grellett in 1859 wrote this. And no, somebody else said no, it was William Penn, a Quaker from Pennsylvania. It's also been attributed to Marcus Aurelius, William Shakespeare, and a variety of other people. At least 24 were listed. So. But it doesn't really matter, does it? Because I think the words just go right to the heart of the matter. What's happening right now, and what's my intention around my life in this moment? So I would read that and sit and meditate, or lie down and meditate, play the organ for a little bit, and turn it off, close the windows, get back on the bike and head out. So a moment of intention, and for some reason we always seem to be at the beach about this time of year, be late August or September. So the other recent experience around intention, last week I was in Spirit Rock, California, finishing up a 2-year teacher leadership training for community Dharma leaders. And at the end of the week, we were asked to write down an intention, and in the graduation ceremony to actually place this written intention in a bowl on an altar at the front of the meditation hall. And so spent some time thinking about an intention, and this is what came up for me. This is what I wrote. So my intention, and perhaps it's much like your own, is to move over the land practicing kindness, compassion, and generosity for the well-being of all. And the second part of my intention, which is a little bit more related to the teaching aspect, is to teach the Dharma in my own voice from my heart. So tonight, this talk is going to be a little bit more about the different dimensions of intention. And you may recognize, of course, that intention is part of the Eightfold Path that was taught by the Buddha. And the Eightfold Path, of course, is part of the Fourth Noble Truth. And the idea here is that the 8 aspects of the path are not, they're not as linear as they look on paper. So on paper they're listed 1 through 8, but in reality they all are interconnected, interwoven, so that there's a lot of interrelationship between the 8. And just to remind you, in case you've forgotten, the first 2 aspects of the path are the wisdom factors, and they include the right view and right intention. So the one I'm speaking about tonight, right intention, is the second one. And it comes right before the next 3, which are all about ethical conduct, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So the right intention is a bridge between right view and ethical conduct. And then, of course, the last 3 are right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So the first noble truth, the first aspect of the Eightfold Path, right view, is really about our cognitive understanding, the way we see things. And this second one, right intention, really refers to volition, or the energy that we bring to what it is we will do, what it is, how we will act. And in Pali, right intention is called sammasankappa, which can be translated as right intention, right thought, right attitude, or right aspiration. And by the way, some people substitute the word wise for right. So there are a number of ways to interpret it. So the intention is linked to the view, which then leads to, volitionally, to the action. And you can think about this in terms of, well, for example, whatever you are doing for livelihood in your life's work, or what you were doing if you're now retired. And there's probably some very direct link between what you're doing as vocational work and what your belief is in terms of the view that you hold about the world. There's a connection there. And you could think about it in terms of right intention as being some sort of liberating emotional intelligence in your life, and therefore acting from love and compassion, particularly when the view is closely linked to, the right view is closely linked to your actions. There's a lot of compassion there. So the Buddha distinguished 3 types of right intention, and I want to talk a little bit about those 3. The first one being the intention of renunciation. And that simply means that resistance to the pull of clinging, craving, desire when we find ourselves attached to certain things in life. That's the first kind of right intention. The second one would be the right intention of goodwill, which means resisting feelings of anger or aversion. And it's really about cultivating metta. And the third would be the intention of harmlessness. So that would mean to resist any feelings of acting cruelly or violently or aggressively, and to develop compassion for other beings, including ourselves. So one of the things that we notice historically and currently, that when wrong view prevails, that it can have an enormous impact not only on the individual, but it spreads out so that it impacts our communities and our societies and our countries and our world with unwholesome actions. And it gives rise often to an sort of an endless competition for wealth, for power, oppression. And the thing to remember is that all of this is coming from right view, right intention, right action, or in this case, unwholesome views, intentions, and actions. If we want to look at an example of where right view has served an individual and many, many other people really well, we can look at the story of Suu Kyi from Myanmar, who's been in this country for the last couple of weeks accepting the Congressional Gold Medal of Honor. And if you've listened to her speak, it's really wonderful to hear this very calm, compassionate person speak without bitterness, without tones of revenge. She, as you may know, was under house arrest for 15 years. Her children were raised in a country away from her. Her husband died while she chose to remain. And she watched her country change dramatically from the time when her father actually helped guide the country toward independence before he was assassinated in 1947 when she was a child. But you look at what she said that she did while she was in captivity, and one of the things she said she did was she maintained a strict practice of meditation, of exercise, of listening to the radio, and of reading. And we see the results of that in watching her as she has spoken around the country last week. So we live in this world where we're really conditioned to seek happiness, and we believe that somehow if we just pursue the objects that we're after long enough, that we will indeed secure. In fact, we've been told by the media that we will find happiness, right? If you've bought the latest smartphone, right? Got that new iPhone in your pocket. So whatever we're after, whether it's the perfect job or the perfect life partner or the newest piece of technology that holds out some level of excitement or power or capability toward us, it's easy to get entangled in those desires. And this form of greed arises as thoughts. And one of the things we know is that we can substitute other thoughts in an effort to replace those thoughts of greed. And the only problem is that when we really try to do this, it's not as easy as it sounds. It sounds like, okay, well, I'll just have another thought that opposes that one of greed. And what we discover is that we've really been highly conditioned to want what we want, when we want it, where we want it, how we want it. So the question then becomes how to break the shackles of desire and of attachment. So for some of us, we may try to repress it. Just repress that desire a little bit. But it's a little bit like trying to hold a beach ball underwater for any length of time. It's impossible to do. And what we discover is that it's still there. It really doesn't go anywhere, even though we're trying to push it away. The tool that the Buddha held out to free the mind from desire was understanding. And what's one of the things that's been written by Bhikkhu Bodhi is that real renunciation is not a matter of compelling ourselves to give up things still inwardly cherished, but of changing our perspective on them so that they no longer bind us. So that they no longer bind us. So if we look at this phenomena of desire, we see that it's really closely connected to suffering, to dukkha. And ordinarily we're just looking at the surface of things and we see them in terms of our immediate interests, what we want right now. But only rarely do we dig into it and look at what lies beneath of that. And by the way, what does this mean for the long haul? This desire that springs up suddenly, because in that moment when we're desiring something, there's a sense of lack. There's a sense of, I need something, I want this or that. And there's real suffering there to be caught in that. So if we can look at the undertones of what's going on, of what's fueling that desire, really exploring the short and long-term consequences of that action or those words, we begin to have a different understanding. And we begin maybe to evaluate the worthiness of what it is we're aspiring to or intending towards. And this part may be a little bit more difficult to swallow, but when we do this investigation, one of the things that we discover is that it's not always pleasant. So can you resonate with that? This is not always pleasant. And but what's important is to stay with it, to see what's true. Not what's most pleasant, but what's true about this. And this sentence, we have to be prepared and willing to discover what is true even at the cost of our immediate comfort. Because real security always lies on the side of truth, not on the side of comfort. And sometimes even when we get what we want, the pleasure is rather short-lived. We know this from material kinds of things. If there's a purchase made of something, it's very easy to get hooked into the next one or the next one. And so the demands of desire sometimes seem endless. They go on and on and on. And each desire demands the eternal. It wants the things we get to last forever. And of course we know that's not true. That's not one of the truths we know, which is impermanence. Nothing is permanent. So whether it's wealth or power or position or other persons, as in relationships, separation is inevitable at some point. And the pain that accompanies the separation is proportional to the degree of attachment. So if we're strongly attached to something, the degree of separation brings a lot of suffering. And if we're only somewhat attached, then the separation brings a modicum of suffering. If we're not attached at all, then there's very little suffering. So you might think, well, gosh, if I'm not attached to anything, that must mean a pretty dry life with no abundance, but a sense of destitution. But in reality, it's actually the reverse. It's moving from fear, because fear is an underlying piece of this wanting things, wanting to hold on to things, fear of the inevitable separation or loss. So to be able to move to this sense of non-clinging actually brings a sense of release, a sense of joy, and a sense of freedom, greater freedom. So if we can shed the attachments like leaves on a tree, then the change will come. And it's much like a tree in autumn that's slowly losing its leaves, one at a time. It doesn't happen all of a sudden. That this is a practice, this learning to be less attached or not clinging. So in this process, the intention of renunciation dislodges the intention of desire. So that's the first right intention. And the second one is goodwill. So goodwill, of course, is opposed to the ill will or thoughts that are governed by anger or aversion. And if we act out of ill will, sometimes we feel like we've gotten it off our chest. You could think back maybe to some time when you were really angry and you said something, and in the moment it felt big sigh of relief, because it's I've said it, it's out there, it's gone. But what was the long-term repercussion of that? Was it as wonderful as it felt in the moment that it occurred? And perhaps so, if it was spoken with wisdom. But often what happens is that behind that we have some regrets about how we articulated it, what exactly we said. It can build resentment in relationships, provoke retaliation if it's not wisely spoken, or poison relationships. And how many times have we said something that we just wished we could undo the tape, start over again? Yeah. And again, if you repress this ill will in terms of what's going on in the moment, it may transform into self-contempt. So, or chronic depression, or a tendency to irrational outbursts of violence. So what to do with that? Because we're back to the beach ball thing. We're trying to repress it, and it can't stay that way. So the remedy, again, that the Buddha recommends to counteract ill will, especially when the object is another person, which it often is this quality called metta, which is a feeling of love for one's fellow beings. And it's a radiating outward of this heartfelt, instinctive response to other beings. So it's not a mechanical something that you call into action, sentimental goodwill. That's not it. It's characterized by spontaneous warmth. And again, it's a practice. So we practice this regularly to develop these reactions to others, responses to others. And metta, once it's well developed, really doesn't depend on our relationship with the other person. So it doesn't have to be the other person that I really care about, or who's really important to me, or that I love. It can be someone you don't know. Actually, it can be someone you think you may harbor some ill feelings toward for some reason. You can still extend the practice of metta to that individual. And we know from neuroscience research that what we're talking about in both of these practices, and the third one I'm going to speak about, is that what we're really doing is changing behavior by laying down some new neural grooves in the brain. And the way to do that is practice. It's like learning anything else. The more you practice, the more it becomes an automatic reflex. Like brushing your teeth. You don't have to think about it. It just is present. So let's do a little metta practice right now. So if you would, just get comfortable in your seat right now. So you can lean back in the chair, maybe just have your feet on the floor, hands relaxed in your lap. And closing the eyes if that's comfortable for you. And one of the things we do in this metta practice is looking into our own minds. We find the basic urge of our being is the wish to be happy and to be free from suffering. And we know this to be true for ourselves. And with practice, we begin to understand that all living beings share this same basic wish to be happy and free from suffering, and to be well and to be secure. So I'm going to invite you to practice metta for several different beings right now, and I'll offer some phrases for this practice. If they work for you, that's great, and if not, substitute your own language, your own words for this metta practice. So to begin with, if you would bring to mind the image of someone who has been a benefactor for you. Someone who has mentored you or supported you. And allowing this image to fill the mind's eye. Or just noticing what the felt sense of the presence of this person, this being is. And extending to this being your wishes for their well-being. May you be safe from inner and outer harm. May you be strong and well. May you be peaceful and live with ease. And may you be happy. And then letting the image of this benefactor dissolve. And bring to mind right now the image of a dear friend. Someone who has stood by you, listened well, consoled you, held you up, loved you. And extending to this being your wishes for their well-being. May you be safe from inner and outer harm. May you be strong and well. May you be peaceful and live with ease. And may you be happy. saying goodbye to this dear one, bring to mind an image of yourself. You as you are today, or as you were as a child, or a baby. And holding this image of yourself, extending wishes for your own well-being. May I be safe from inner and outer harm. May I be strong and well. May I be peaceful and live with ease. And may I be happy. And then letting go of the image of yourself. And bring to mind an image of someone you don't know so well, so where there's a neutral relationship, or maybe you've made up some stories in your own mind about this person. Just holding the image of this individual. Could be someone who's in the room tonight, or a distant colleague, neighbor, somebody you see at the grocery store. And see if it's possible to extend the same wish for their happiness. And may you be safe from inner and outer harm. May you be strong and well. And may you be peaceful and live with ease. And may you be happy. And letting the image of this being fade. Only if it seems right for you right now. To bring to mind the image of someone with whom you've had a small disagreement or conflict. Not the biggest one from your life story, but someone with whom there's been a bit of conflict. Only if it seems right for you, extending wishes for their well-being. May you be safe from inner and outer harm. May you be strong and well. May you be peaceful and live with ease. And may you be happy. And letting the image of this being fade. Seeing if it's possible to extend the kindness, the wish for well-being in all directions. East, south, west, north, above and below. Extending our wishes for the safety, the health, the peace, and happiness to all beings. Those who walk, crawl, fly, swim. May all beings be happy. Then opening the eyes. And I'm looking at the clock, and I think I'll save the third piece of this for the next Dharma talk. So just in brief, the intention of harmlessness as the third kind of right intention. And for that, a practice of compassion. And I'll just give you the phrase because it's quite simple, and then you can take it home with you and try it out for yourself. But the phrase would be, may you be free from suffering. And practicing it in much the same way that we just did the loving kindness practice, which is to extend it to self, to a dear one, to a neutral party, and then to the world. So, in closing, to develop the intention of renunciation, we contemplate the suffering that's tied up with the quest for worldly enjoyment. And to develop the intention of goodwill, we consider how all beings want to be happy. And to develop the intention of harmlessness, we reflect upon how all beings want to be free from suffering. And the mind in blessing mood has no aversion and no negativity. So may that be of some comfort as you go forth this week. So after thieves broke into his hut in the year 1079, monk Royakan wrote, "At least the robbers left this one thing behind, moon in my window." So, if the skies have cleared, maybe you could take a look at the moon tonight or on Saturday when it's full and reflect upon your own intention for this time in your life. Thank you for listening.